Are you making these 4 investment mistakes? Because if you are, it could completely derail your retirement plans. Now, in this video, I'm going to explain what these 4 mistakes are, more importantly, how you can avoid them. If you're not familiar with who I am, my name is Oliver El-Gorr. I run a company called Freeman Publications, and over the past 5 years, we've helped countless retirees and prospective retirees gain clarity on their financial situation and help them make the most of their money before and during retirement. So without further ado, let's get into the video and see what these 4 mistakes are. Into the handy dandy PowerPoint we go, and it's 4 investing mistakes that could ruin your retirement. Before I get into things, I think a bit of context is in order. So in 2024, I'm recording this on the 15th of December. I've had 301 individual phone calls or Zoom calls with retirees or prospective retirees. So that's people usually between the ages of 45 and 65, and they're in all kinds of financial situations. Through these calls and the multiple emails I get upon this topic every single day, I've distilled down the 4 largest mistakes that people make both leading up to and in retirement. Now, this is purely investing related, so we're not going to cover things like healthcare or anything like that. This is purely to do with investing, your investment portfolio, and your finances. So, mistake number 1, and this is the core principle of everything investing related. Mistake number 1 is not understanding what it is you actually own. Now, this mainly applies if you have given your money to a financial advisor or a wealth manager, and they are managing your portfolio on your behalf. Now, even if you've chosen to do that, and personally I don't think you should, but even if you have, you must understand what it is your money is being invested in. Their fiduciary duty is to manage your money and give you the optimum level of return and risk that you have agreed with them. Your fiduciary duty to yourself is to know where that money is being invested. Now, unfortunately, this industry is rife with bad actors. They are going to hit you with high-level buzzwords like diversification, downside protection, multi-factor approach. That's a big sexy one. But in reality, what it leads to is you will end up owning between 10 and 20 different mutual funds, which claim to give you this perfect asset allocation that is never going to go down and you're going to get all these beautiful benefits. Oftentimes that is not the case whatsoever. So here's what I mean by that. The first big problem is redundancy. The advisor or wealth manager industry, the incentives are misskewed. Their incentive is to sell you as much stuff as possible. In other words, invest your money in as many funds as possible, because a lot of the time they get a kickback from investing in those funds. And a big problem is they own multiple of these mutual funds which have holdings in the exact same stocks. Now on the screen here, I've got 4 examples. I've got VOO, which is the Vanguard S&P 500 ETF. I've got Schwab Large Cap Growth, that's a mutual fund. Capital Funds Growth Fund of America, that's a mutual fund. JP Morgan Large Cap Growth Fund, another mutual fund. You'll see the bottom 3 have expense ratios over 1% or near 1%, almost 30 times higher than VOO. And the reason I mention these funds in particular is I spoke to one of our clients and his financial advisor had him in all 3 of these funds, which was a terrible idea. And I'll explain why on the next slide. Because there's no diversification provided by owning multiple funds which own the exact same stocks in roughly the same proportion. Once again, the only person who actually benefits from that is the advisor getting their kickbacks or their load fees or that nice percentage of your assets under management each and every year. So I've got 2 of those funds on the screen here. We've got the Schwab fund on the left, the JP Morgan fund on the right. And as you can see, their top 10 holdings are the same. The only difference is the Schwab fund has a little bit of dollars in there, and for some reason Palo Alto Networks, which is a good company, but it's a bit of an anomaly here. The JP Morgan fund is basically just the S&P 500. the top 10 of that. I mean, there's a couple of changes. I think MasterCard is there instead of Berkshire Hathaway, and Broadcom isn't there. But apart from that, this is just the S&P 500 at 30 times the expense ratio. Once again, you don't need to own both of these. And I don't need to spell identical with two N's. You also have the problem of all of these bond funds that don't actually offer you the protection that they purport to have. So the basic idea behind owning bonds in a portfolio is bonds or bond funds typically have inverse correlation to stock or equity funds. So the theory is when stocks go down, they provide protection because bonds are going to go up, and vice versa. Stocks go up most of the time, so around 8 out of every 10 years, stocks are up. Those 2 years when stocks are down, these bond funds are going to provide you this protection. However, now you have a bunch of money invested in these corporate bond funds that tanked in 2022 alongside stocks. So when stocks went down in 2022, bond funds, specifically corporate bond funds, went down as well, which is a 1-2 punch to your portfolio that you did not want. Just because something has bond in the name does not mean it's low risk. That's the other part to this, especially when we're dealing with corporate bonds. For example, the largest corporate bond ETF with about $50 billion invested in it is actually down over the past 3 years, including 2022 when it was supposed to offer all of this glorious protection for your stock portfolio going down. So that's not going to do what you want it to do. And this is doubly true, especially anything related to mortgage-backed securities, or MBS in the name. If you're not familiar, mortgage-backed securities were the big reason why everything blew up in 2008. If you're interested in this stuff, I'd recommend reading both Liar's Poker and The Big Short by Michael Lewis. They're both fantastic books. The Big Short goes into sort of what happened in 2008, why everything blew up. Liar's Poker sets the scene for that and the rise of mortgage-backed securities. The other issue is the fallacy of how ETFs themselves are named. So even if you manage your own portfolio and you are solely invested in ETFs, you can't take the name of the fund at face value. For example, ESG ETFs. Most of these are just 90% the same as the S&P 500, but with higher expense ratios. Things like emerging markets. Now, when I say to you emerging markets, what countries come to mind? In reality, there are so many emerging market ETFs that just mean non-US. So they've got China, for example. I personally wouldn't consider China an emerging market. Same with Korea, same with Taiwan. I would not consider those emerging markets. But a big bulk of these emerging market ETFs have a lot of their funds invested in those three countries. The other interesting thing is this whole growth or value split. So there's a lot of ETFs, for example, large cap growth, large cap value, mid cap growth, mid cap value. A lot of the time, how these actually work is they just split whatever index they're tracking in half. The higher value stocks get listed as growth, the lower value stocks get listed as value. That's not particularly useful because, you may just have a stock which isn't a growth stock with a very high valuation for whatever reason at that particular time. So just splitting things between growth and value at face value, no pun intended, is limited and once again, may not do what you expect it to do. So again, two different funds, almost identical stocks. I spelled identical correctly this time. ESG fund on the left, and then I've just got SPY on the right. Once again, it's the same thing. Apple, Nvidia, Microsoft, Amazon, Alphabet, Meta, Tesla. It's the same thing. Except the ESG fund, once again, you're paying 6 times the expense ratio for the same stocks. So this is going to lead me into my next mistake, by the way, my next point. So even if you own individual stocks, which I am personally a proponent of, if you can't give me a 2-sentence summary on what a company does and how it makes money, you should not own that company. You should not own that stock. So stop buying stuff blindly just because someone on YouTube said it was a good idea, someone on Twitter said it was a good idea, investing newsletters, or the worst one of all, random tips from family and friends. If you don't understand a company and its business model and how it makes money on a very basic level, the only thing that you can use to judge performance is day-to-day stock price valuations. Awful indicator of a long-term potential of a company and of an investment. You know, every single company that has done phenomenally well over the past 10, 20, 30 years has had periods where it has struggled. All of those big names in the index, Apple, Amazon, Meta. I mean, Meta's a great example. 3 years ago, we don't even have to look back that long, everyone hated the company. 2 years ago, it was less than $100 a share. It's over $600 today. If you didn't understand Meta's business model and understand that that dip was just cyclical because advertising dollars had slowed down, then you'd have probably sold the stock at $99 a share and missed out on all of those gains. So I beg you, I implore you, if you've got stocks like this in your portfolio, just sell them. Just get rid of them. Put that money to better use. Or if you don't want to do that, at least take the time to understand what it is your money's being invested in. It blows my mind that people will spend hours researching car parts online or at the grocery store comparing 2 different packages of ground beef, but then they'll shove 20 grand into a random ticker symbol because someone on the internet said it was a good idea, and they'll do that in 3 minutes. It's insane to me. So if you are falling victim to doing this, please just stop. I'll forgive you, but just stop and decide that, you know what, today is where I'm going to stop doing this. So that's mistake number 1, not understanding what you own. Mistake number 2, paying needless fees and or taxes. Now, I ain't a fan of taxes, but I'm not one of those people who believes that taxation is theft. I understand the value of them. But the fact is, taxes are going to impact you far more than returns will. Same with fees. For almost everyone watching this, taxes are going to be your number 1 expense in life. Even in retirement, things like Social Security get taxed. SIP funds, if you're in the UK like I am, your SIP's going to get taxed. And let's face it, if you worked hard and you did well for yourself, you already paid enough tax throughout your working life. Don't pay unnecessarily taxes in retirement as well. So fees, let's think about fees for a second. Let's say you've got a $500,000 account. Your standard financial advisor approach, you get your 1% management fee, and then let's say you're averaging 0.7% with fees from the funds that your advisor has put you in. So we've got 1.7% a year. Over a 10-year period, that's $85,000 in fees on that $500,000 account. That's on the low end as well. That's not even including if there's load fees, withdrawal fees, or anything like that. $85,000. That's a lot of money. Compare that to a self-managed approach. There's no management fees, first of all, so that 1%'s gone straight away. If you're in lower expense ratio ETFs, you can probably get that average down to 0.25% if you take an ETF only approach. If you select the right funds, you can get it even lower. If you're in individual stocks, there's no fees at all. So I've used, once again, this is on the high end, 12.5 grand over 10 years. Nothing for individual stocks. That's 85.3% lower over a 10-year period. That's $70,000 that you could use to buy more stocks. $70,000. That's a college tuition right there. Even in America, where it's bloody expensive. $70,000 saved. This is worth thinking about. The other thing is, take advantage of what you have. Do not give money to the tax man unnecessarily. This stuff is basic, but it bears repeating sometimes. Things like employer 401k matches, whatever the equivalent is in the UK. I'm self-employed, so I actually don't know. Roth IRA contributions. Remember, Roths can be passed down in your estate tax-free. HSAs as well, don't underestimate those, because there are certain tax advantages that you get. But make sure you're maximizing all of those opportunities that are given to you. The other thing is, if you're older than 50 and you haven't contributed the max, you can have catch-up contributions. That's really, really important, especially if you feel like you started late, or if you did start late, maximize your catch-up contributions, because that can really, really help. I also don't like the idea of trying to predict the future 20 or 30 years ahead. The first thing is you don't know what your personal situation is going to be in 20 years. You might have a rough idea, but you don't know with any degree of true accuracy. You also don't know what tax rates are going to be. So make sure you don't have all your eggs in one basket. Different types of accounts, for example, tax deferred like traditional IRAs, tax free like a Roth IRA, tax free on withdrawal before anyone else goes off in the comments over the age of 59, as long as you've had your account for 5 years. And of course, taxable accounts, you will have flexibility. If tax rates do go up, you can lean more on your Roth. If they remain low, you can keep your stuff in the Roth compounding, withdraw from your traditional assets. So that's the second mistake, taxes and fees. Mistake number 3, I don't see a lot of people talking about this one, the lump sum fallacy. Now this here is really the difference between theory and practice. So earlier this year I did a call with some of the members of our community. I think we had about 150 people on the call. And I was asking, well, how much is enough for retirement? Is a 500k portfolio enough? Is a $1 million portfolio enough? Is a $3 million portfolio enough? And funnily enough, the reason I asked this is because I'd already asked people with portfolios with each of those amount in it. They were roughly the same age. They were in their mid-50s. And they all had families. So there's no like, oh, this one doesn't have kids, blah, 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 blah. They all had families. So 500k, 1 million, 3 million. Is that enough? Guess what they said? That says 4, should be 3. Double the amount. They felt like they needed to double it. Even the person with 3 million said, oh, you know what? I'd feel a lot more comfortable with 6. And here is the problem, because this, by the way, doesn't end. I asked another person with 8 million, said the same thing. I feel like I'd need to double it to feel really safe. I think the same way as well. But there is a caveat to this. The save until you hit a particular number plan, it does not work. This whole FIRE number thing, it sounds great in theory. All you need to do is reach X number based on how much you're going to withdraw and it will be perfect. First of all, this really does not survive if you get a big market downturn. And I'll explain why a little bit later on. The second reason is it's a repetition thing. It's a muscle thing. You exercise your savings muscle for so long, you see that number in your account build up and up and up and up, and then overnight, you've got to start seeing the number go down. Now imagine doing something for 30 years and you've been told you're doing things the right way, you're doing things the right way, everything you're doing is correct. Overnight, someone tells you, yeah, you know what, mate, just do the opposite now. You'd be like, what? What? Doesn't make any sense. But that's what you are being asked to do. Save, 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 deplete, 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 deplete. This is why everyone thinks they need double, because they don't want to see that number go down. If you got $1 million, you're like, well, if I had 2 million and it was hard, I'd still have $1 million. Same with 1.5, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever it may be. And this is especially true with rising living costs and people living longer. Do you know that if you and your spouse are 50 years old, there's a 50% chance one of you is going to live until 90? That's 40 years. That's almost as long as you've been alive. So this idea that you can just get to a number and then start cashing out doesn't work. And I can hear the keyboards going off. I can hear the phones going crazy. People are like, what about the 4% rule? What about that? So if you're not familiar with that, what that is, the 4% rule is a retirement planning rule that basically says you can withdraw 4% of your retirement funds in the first year and then keep doing that every year after that as your portfolio depletes, because obviously 4% is going to be less and less and less of an amount because your portfolio is also going to appreciate in that time. So they've done studies on this and they say, you know what? Through all of the conditions, you won't run out of money if you do it for 30 years and you withdraw 4%. The problem with that, because I'm not disputing those studies, they are correct, but they're studies. Simulated tests are not reality. So here's what is reality. First things first, expenses are not linear. Ask anyone who's actually retired for 10, 15, 20 years. Oh, were your expenses the same every year? No, of course they weren't. For most people, they are going to be front loaded. What I mean by that is you're going to have more expenses in the first few years of retirement. So if you happen to stumble upon a scenario where you've retired, you've got your number, your expenses are still reasonably high, and then you get a downturn in the market. So let's say you had let's just keep it easy. Let's say you got $1 million. Got $1 million in the account. You're like, we can live off $1 million. 4% rule, 40 grand a year withdrawals. You get a downturn year one of 20%. That $1 million is now 800 grand. But you actually didn't have to withdraw 4% in the first year. It was a bit higher. Let's say it was 6%. So you got 800 grand. You didn't withdraw 4%. You actually had to withdraw 60,000. So that $1 million is now 740,000 at the end of year one. Panic stations, right? Once again, it leaves you at a greater risk if there is an immediate downturn. And the thing is, this is only going to get worse. People are supporting kids for longer. Kids are living at home for longer and longer and longer. That's an entirely separate topic for an entirely separate video. But the fact is, it's true. Look at the data. Just anecdotally, drive around your neighborhood and see how many driveways have 3 and 4 cars on them. My goodness, I did this earlier today. I was ranting to my better half. I was like, why does everyone have so many cars around here? Then I realized it's adult children still living at home. Once again, people are living longer. And the other part of this that I think is kind of missed out is the current market has lower interest rates than when the rule was first sort of introduced or popularized. Now, the original study was conducted in 1994. So we never had the zero interest rate phenomenon then. That's only a post-2008 phenomenon. But all of those bond funds that you owned, well, between 2009 and 2021, those were basically useless because rates were sub 1%, other than a little rise in 2015, 2016. But you're not getting anything from then. So once again, the rule itself is flawed. The biggest reason for this is that they don't take emotions into account. A simulation can do a 25% drawdown in year one. Nothing changes. It's still going to simulate. Humans aren't simulations. They have emotions, they have fears, they have worries, they stay awake at night panicking about this stuff. 25% drawdowns in real life hurt. I've been investing for 15 years now. 2020 was tough, those first few months. 2022 was tough. I wouldn't want to think about the idea of going through that again with no earning power, with no income coming in. You can take all your simulations, but in reality, we're not robots, we're not Excel spreadsheets. So seeing these massive drawdowns is going to destroy you. Maybe not financially, but mentally it's going to take a big toll. So the lump sum approach doesn't work. So you've got to do something else. You need a reframe for how you think about retirement finance. And the reframe for me, the thing that really flipped the switch, and I tell people this every single day, comfortable retirement is not a set number that you withdraw from. Instead, it's a monthly income number that you can generate from your portfolio to maintain a good standard of living. Now, that is on top of what you already get from Social Security, or if you've got a private pension, what you already get from that. If you've got additional income streams like rental income from a property, or if you're getting dividends or kickbacks, or not kickbacks, sorry, distributions from a business that you own, those are additional income streams too. But the best part about this is this can start long before you're even thinking about retirement. If you're 30, 40, 50 years old and retirement still seems a long way off for you, you can start this part of it now. Get ahead of the game, let your gains compound when you don't need to withdraw them. Your future self will thank you. And let's just think about this. I've got 3 hypothetical portfolios here. So 500k again. 500k in SPY. Now, we're only doing income here. We're not doing capital gains. SPY currently pays 1.16% dividends. So you're going to get just over 5 grand, 450 a month. That is what? That's a modest car payment. That's electricity for a month or two, depending on where you live. A couple of nice meals. It's not really going to move the needle. 500k in something like a money market or T-bills, which currently pay around 4.5%, 22.5 grand, so just shy of 2,000 a month. Now that's better. That's better, but for this you're sacrificing all capital appreciation. 500k in the third option, which is what I call our safe, simple income producing strategy, which I'm going to talk more about next. You can probably make around 75 grand in annual income. In 2023, do 169,000 using this exact strategy. Now, I'm going to just delete this for a second and focus on the smaller number, 75k, 6,200 a month. Now, for a lot of you watching this video, 6,200 plus Social Security, plus whatever else you've got going on, if that's not going to cover everything, that's going to make a big dent in it. And it's going to give you a lot more of a buffer without having to withdraw money from the portfolio, because this is income generated from the portfolio without withdrawals. So the portfolio stays the same. So that's something to think about just for a second. And for a lot of you, you don't need that much money. You just need a little bit to make up the difference. If you only need 2 grand a month extra to be comfortable, you could put 150k your portfolio in a very conservative approach. And to give you some context for that, I've made 2,000 a month doing this strategy from just 40,000 of capital. And you can leave the remainder of your portfolio compounding nicely, or if you're the most risk-averse person in the world, put the rest in T-bills. Put the rest in the money market. It ain't going to go down. Not going to go up that much, but it'll be as safe can be. Nothing's ever completely risk-free, but it's quite close to it. So let's think about this. We've got old way and new way here. You don't want to stress about retirement. You don't want to see things get eaten by inflation. You don't want to be at the mercy of the market. You've got no income generation the old way. And ultimately this, high levels of anxiety about your financial future and your ability to sustain your lifestyle in retirement. No one wants to work hard for 30, 40 years to go back to eating ramen and worrying about, can you go out to eat once a month? Come on, you worked harder than that. But the new way, easier, stress-free retirement, surviving downturns, consistent income generation. In a good year, you can do 20% plus, very conservatively. And most importantly of all, confidence in your financial future. Not worrying at night about if you're going to run out of money. Knowing that you can pass stuff down to another generation or even another generation after them. And that's more important than anything else. And that gives me the intro to mistake number 4, which is not making investing part of your lifestyle. Now this is more nuanced, but I think it's really important. So a lot of times when people retire, what that actually means is they stop working their 9 to 5, or if they're a business owner, they sell the business and they stop. So they go from 100 to 0, like they slam on the brakes. You go from working 40 plus hours a week to 0. And that's going to be the biggest lifestyle change that many people have had in 20 or 30 years. Probably since you had kids. Because kids is a big lifestyle change. I know this, I'm going through this right now. My daughter is just shy of 5 months old as I'm recording this video. So if my jumper has stains on it, it's probably her fault. But for many people here, a void opens up. They talk about empty nesters and the issues that come there, but this is also a problem because you've got so much free time now, and hobbies and families can fill some of it, and hopefully it does fill a good chunk, because that's what really matters in life, love and fulfillment and being surrounded by people who care for you. But there's an intellectual part that is missing here. And I see it so often, and it's really unfortunate. You become victim because there's a void and that void always gets filled. You just spend time doing pointless stuff like doom scrolling social media, getting outraged at whatever political party you don't support said that day. And that's a massive waste of your life. But instead, if you make investing part of your lifestyle, you stay sharp. Because mental cognition is a major factor in physical longevity. Look at people like Warren Buffett, or my personal favourite, Ed Thorpe. Ed Thorpe, this was taken 7 years ago. He's 91 years old now. Does he look 84 in this photo? By the way, if you don't know who Ed Thorpe is, one of the best investors of all time. Fascinating life story as well. A Man for All Markets is the book he wrote most recently. It's probably the best one if you want an intro to him. But he's 91 years old now and he looks incredible. And you listen to him speak and he's still so sharp. You would never believe he's 91. But that's what this next thing is going to give for you. It's why I like our safe, simple income approach. You spend 4 or 5 hours per week, not per day. We don't want this to be a full-time job, per week, on focusing on generating income from a portion of your investment portfolio. 4 or 5 hours per week, no more than 1 hour per day. You stay mentally sharp. You solve challenging yet solvable problems. You keep exercising that provider muscle, that self-sufficiency muscle that you've been working for the past 20, 30, 40 years. It can't turn off overnight. And you don't need a math degree or a finance background to do it. Plus, as I'm going to talk about in a little bit, if you do this in a Roth IRA, you get tax-free withdrawals after the age of 59. Or, if you want to compound it, tax-deferred compounding. In a traditional IRA, solo 401k, you do it in a SAS if you're in the UK. You can also replicate it in a TFSA if you're in Canada. It's not the exact same, but you can replicate it. This safe, simple income approach that I like so much is called the wheel strategy. You may have heard of it or you may not have heard of it. In essence, it is selling covered options. By covered, I mean you either have the cash to secure the position or you have the shares to secure the position. Selling covered options in a low-risk, conservative way. Now, options has got a dirty word. Options is a dirty word. And I'm here to dispel that for a second. This is the same strategy that Warren Buffett uses. Now, Warren Buffett you don't think of as a risk-loving investor. In fact, he's very conservative. But he has used aspects of this strategy in the past. Received premiums of $4.9 billion. Now, you're not going to make that. I'm sorry, spoiler alert, you're not going to make $4.9 billion. But you can make a decent chunk of change in your spare time. Now, the main benefits of doing this. You have consistent cash flow because you're making income rather than unrealized capital gains. You're making income from your portfolio. You can make this as conservative as you want. You can just do this with large indexes if you want, like the SPY. Or I should say technically an index fund or an index tracking ETF. If you use broader ETFs and blue chip dividend stocks, you can make between 12 and 20% a year. Mid and large cap individual stocks, you can make 25% plus in a good year. And even if you're not retired yet, it's a reliable second income stream that'll be there if your job goes away or your business hits a rough patch. So to give you an example of what that could look like, let's say you got a 100k portion of your portfolio. You could use that to generate between 2,500 and 3 grand a month without withdrawing anything. So, that's a mortgage payment. That's a big chunk of a college fund paid for. Or you just leave it in there compounding. And so when you do come to withdraw it, it's an even bigger chunk. And you can also use elements of this to hedge your portfolio during a downturn. And in terms of the money itself, you can use that to pay for vacations, like Janice here, who works with us. Option income paid for our family Europe trip. Incredible. Or you can use it to pay for vacations and then trade while you're on vacation to pay for more vacations. The virtuous vacation cycle. Like Steve, I love this. He had a trade close out when he was at Everest Base Camp in Nepal. One of the coolest places I think anyone has ever traded options from. And in terms of, well, how much can you actually make? Anthony, who's an absolute legend, 56.3% this year. And that was in mid-November. If he'd have actually kept some of those positions open, he probably would have made a bit more the way the market's gone in the past month. But hey, he was going on vacation. He said, you know what, I don't want to monitor anything. I'm just going to close all my positions. 56.3% ROI for the past 12 months. Absolutely incredible. Now, I've only touched on this very briefly. So if you want to get a bit more of an in-depth understanding, I'm going to move myself here, because in the bottom left of this video is going to be another video on YouTube where I show you how I actually trade this in real time. So you see the kinds of stocks that I trade, you see how the trades work. And what I actually do in that video as well is I show you the aftermath of the trade. Because anyone can look good at the beginning, but it's how did those trades actually perform? And I show you the aftermath, I show you the results for 3 of the trades that I put on during that video. So if you are interested in that, just click that video on the bottom left and have a watch of that. But if you made it this far, I hope you enjoyed yourself, because I love making these videos, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.